Excited. We're a week into the Commute Cleaner Challenge, which has coincided nicely in BC with BC Bike Week or whatever it's called. What's it called?
Bike to work.
Bike to work. Bike to work in school. And so we've seen lots more people out on their bikes this week, and it's been great to see. It's nice with the spring weather and everything. So hope you're taking advantage of that and making choices to commute cleaner. And reduce your carbon footprint by reducing your transportation emissions. I'm going to pass it off to Greg Hill, who will be interviewing our guest tonight. And we'll have a chat for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we'll open the floor for questions, which you are welcome to put in the chat or just speak out at the end of the conversation. Over to you, Greg.
How's everyone doing? Izzy looks confused. Sorry I missed last month's, everyone. I was busy with some adventures that I need to go on, but I just, I'm pretty excited to bring in Greg McDougall tonight because this month's all about commuting. And as I committed to electric adventures 4 years ago, I knew that it's one of the ways that we can all change. And you often hear that, you know, yes, like you're trying this month, you're trying to bike, you're trying to maybe walk to work or do other ways. But one of the big things in life is that we all kind of want to travel the world, and we want to, you know, there's so much to see. But once you start getting this eco guilt, it gets a little bit harder. And I think it's really neat what Greg's done with Harbour Air, which we'll get into, is that he's made his company, his airline, the first kind of green company out there. And he's really pushing the envelope and quite an innovator. So, I'll introduce him here. Here's Greg. He is inducted into the Canadian Aviation Hall of Fame. And if you start reading any articles on him, you'll see that there's tons of stuff. But essentially, he's the CEO and founder of Harbour Air, which is a local commuter, not local in BC. It flies about 500,000 people all around. And it's quite neat is that there's all these commuters that go from Vancouver to Victoria daily. And with Greg's help, they've been able to, he's been offsetting all the gas since 2007, I believe. And he's just kind of been, you know, disturbing this industry that needs a bit of shit disturbing. So welcome, Greg. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Before we get into it too deeply about all the great things you've done, we're just curious about any of your hobbies. You know, this POW is protect our winters and mostly skiers, and then we're kind of trending. So we're wondering if you're a skier.
Absolutely. Backcountry skier, sledder, heli skier when I can. I'm actually a heli pilot. So I tend, ironically, to be less of a heli skier and more of a cat skier because I don't have to worry about all the, you know, weather issues going on with a helicopter sitting in the back of it with somebody else flying it. Not that it's dangerous, but for, you know, guys that are kind of control freaks like me, you relax a heck of a lot more when you're sitting in a cat and you let it snow, right? Like you don't care. And heli is awesome on the bluebird days, but when it's not bluebird, I'm sort of squirming around in the back trying to figure out how to see out and what's going on, whatever. But yeah, totally backcountry guy. Do spend some days in the resort, but mostly like to be in the backcountry.
Awesome. And when did you start Harbour Air?
1982. I started it sort of out of the necessity to have a job. I was actually working for a land development company that had a couple of airplanes, and I was flying these guys around. And then in 82, the recession hit, and I was pretty much out of a job. So because they couldn't afford the planes anymore, so I leased the planes from them and then started my own company. Plus, by that point, I realized I was basically unemployable. I was a really bad employee. I would
better boss than employee.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm going to zoom right ahead to 2007 because so your company grew to, you know, 400 employees and such things. And what was the big movement in 2007? I mean, we've all been hearing about global warming and everything for a long time, but what happened in 2007 that made you really take that first step into offsetting your emissions from your company?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, that was pretty much, I would say, I'd like to take all the credit for it, but really it was pretty much employee led. We had a lot of younger employees, and they were, you know, probably more tuned in to what was going on environmentally than I was in those days. And they kind of brought this initiative to me and said, you know, I've been hearing about it and whatever, but they sort of brought it to me and said, you know, this is something we should really consider doing this offset program. And it made sense to me in so many ways. I mean, you know, we've basically taken sort of, you know, our aircraft and put them in people's neighborhoods. I mean, or it's really the other way around, actually, if to be fair. We started off in harbors that were pretty industrial and that, you know, very little sort of residential components. But as things developed in Victoria Harbor, Vancouver Harbor, Nanaimo Harbor, more and more people, you know, building condos and people moving into the neighborhood. So all of a sudden, there we are in a residential neighborhood, and so we started having to think out of necessity about the environmental impacts of that, because, you know, we're basically doing business in people's backyards, let alone the planet. So it made a heck of a lot of sense to me to start looking at these initiatives and figuring out how to you know, sort of coexist with what we were doing and offsetting and any other things that would make sense to be better
and like when we talked yesterday, we talked about offsets, and we all know that they're not perfect, but you've done something a little special. Really, what exactly was that?
Yeah, so we joined a group called Offsetters, and they are under the sort of stewardship of a professor at UBC, James Tansey, who's a you know professor in, you know, environmental sustainability. And so what he did was create projects that wouldn't otherwise exist unless they were funded by these carbon offsets. So it wasn't about planting trees or you know, sort of initiatives that were you know, kind of superficial. They were about you know, methane converters in land waste and different things that were measurable to reduce the carbon you know, input. And so, you know, that really appealed to us because it was sort of measurable and also explainable as to how it worked. And I also had the benefit of having James be able to explain to people how it worked. So that was immensely helpful because it is a bit technical.
It's always good to have a smart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty neat because, you know, 8% of global emissions come from food waste, and if you're recapturing that, it's an amazing way. It's one of the better ways it seems to actually kind of offset, which is fantastic. So let's fast forward into what it was 2019, December 10th, when you went on your first flight, and how many years or how long did it take before you actually stepped into this electric plane we've read about?
Well, I would say from the time that you know, sort of the deciding to do it and the actual flight was really quite quick. It was around a year. We'd been toying with the idea and trying to figure it out. You know, like how do we fund this? How can we get grants? Can we, you know, how can we do it? And the reason for doing it was the same as I just described in terms of trying to mitigate our impacts, not only sort of, you know, globally, but also in the neighborhood. And it fit right in, of course, with, you know, the beautiful places that we fly, you know, are pristine. And so it's automatic that you kind of want to try and mitigate that. But also I'm a you know, big early adopter. I mean, I had the first Tesla, I think, in Vancouver, one of the first 5. I think I had the first, you know, iPhone in British Columbia, practically that because I had to bring it in from the States. It didn't have the service here. So, you know, so I've always been an early adopter, plus the fact that I flew a lot of electric RC airplanes and understood the power to weight ratio and all of that. So it seemed a real natural to me once you know, Tesla started figuring out the batteries and it you know, became apparent that we could do this, and so we started moving towards it. And the other thing about us at Harbour Air is that we're in this unique situation of having these really short stage lengths and then low energy consuming aircraft, which are a single engine. So so we were in a really unique spot in in the ability to convert to this technology a lot earlier, or try to convert to it a lot earlier than anybody else would even consider it, because of the fact that our average stage length is half an hour or less. I mean, the flights to Nanaimo are 20 minutes, and Victoria is like a half an hour. So it left us in a pretty unique position. So when we started moving towards it, we were trying to figure out how to fund it. It just magically, you don't quite qualify for any of these grants, and plus the fact you practically have to spend full time trying to figure out how to fill out the forms and get somebody to look at them and approve it and all the rest of it. So we were pretty frustrated with that whole process. But along came this company, Magniex, which is a producer of aviation aircraft, electric aircraft engines. That's their whole reason for being. Funded by a very wealthy New Zealand industrialist, and save the world kind of guy, thankfully. And so they came along and said, well, we've heard you making noises about wanting to do this, and we're here to help you do it because your interests are exactly aligned with ours. You want to be the first to fly, electric, fully electric passengers on an aircraft, and we want to certify our air engines to do that, our motors. So we'll fund the thing. We'll bring the technology to the party, and we'll marry our two teams together of, I call ours the kind of the wrench twisters, and his team was the laptop guys. And they all got together in our hangar and sort of locked the doors for a month and came up with a plan to get it done, and lo and behold, I think about 9 months later was December 10th, and we flew the first flight. And it was really astonishing to me how much global attention it attracted. I was really overwhelmed. It was that yeah, it was wild. I mean, when I flew that flight and I pulled in, I was pretty focused on getting it done smoothly because of all the attention. But when I came back to the dock, taxied back towards the dock, and I saw the riverbanks were lined with people, there was cameras and people all over the place. It was really a Charles Lindbergh moment. And it was pretty overwhelming. That's when it kind of hit me. And big press conference.
There must have been,
yeah,
must have been tons of nerves beforehand. And let's just rewind right to that moment when you took off. I mean, it must have felt like it was a fantastic dream,
Yeah, I gotta say, I was so focused on just getting it done, and I guess it's what I'm trained to do too, is sort of manage risk and figure out how to assess that as you go along. So I was pretty focused just on getting the flight done, and then but I did sort of allow myself that kind of overwhelming moment when I got back and stepped out and everybody was cheering, and it was quite a show. But it really was I guess fulfilling in terms of here's this crazy idea, and we went and did it, and people paid attention, right? And they believe in it, and they should, because it's happening. And that was just the start.
You are pushing, which we all love.
Yeah, a lot of doubters along the way. They're still there, but they're a lot less noisy these days.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask that. So the doubters that have always asked me is like, it's the impact of lithium versus fuel, all the process and building the batteries and everything. And I know that recycling is getting better, but what's your typical answer to those naysayers that say, well, it's worse than fuel?
Well, first of all, lithium, was miscategorized as a rare earth metal. It isn't, and there is a process in making the batteries, but really it's all about measurable. And when you take the impact of making the batteries and then using these batteries for the multiple cycles that they're used against burning fossil fuels, and then And I can tell you for a fact that the engines that we're currently using that run at 800 degrees Celsius, with all the metals and everything involved in those, and the rebuilds that have to happen and discard in those metals and everything else. So it's really kind of a no-brainer if you start really, adding up the columns. Plus the fact that the recycle now is a big deal, and in aviation use, the batteries actually do cycle out before their useful life is over, and they could be actually recycled immediately into other types of uses like off-grid, power systems and other things. And then when they actually reach their actual useful end of their useful life, all of the materials can be recycled. So they're actually pretty environmentally sustainable batteries.
It is really nice to read about the fact that they're able to recycle 95% of the batteries now, and that soon.
Yeah, and this is all in the EV world with the vehicles. I mean, this is a huge issue, right? Like aviation is minuscule compared to how these batteries are being used in vehicles and regular cars.
Do you foresee that battery ending up charging Hop Creek Farm?
Sure. Well, it's certainly charging my app, and I've got a complete off-grid system up there. And with the tracking solar panels and I'm still using lead acids, but that's only because they haven't worn out yet. So I'm using them to their life, and then I'll be replacing them with lithium, because lithium is now becoming really economical if you compare the amount. I mean, I don't want to get too techie on you, but there's a whole lot of things about lithium in terms of their life cycles, way longer than lead acid, and then also the fact that you can use 80% of the capacity of a lithium battery and only 50% of the capacity of a lead acid battery. So if you start actually doing the math in terms of what they cost, which is coming down dramatically, and what the lead acids cost, at the end of the day, lithium is almost equal, and then it's going to pull ahead here pretty quick.
Yeah, and it seems like the more every day you read about aluminum or different metals that are coming, and there's they're being made more and more efficient. There are billions of dollars being poured into this technology as we speak, by not people working out of their basements and garages. This is all the major aerospace companies have projects around the electrification of aviation, every single one of them. That's a question. So do you think that this is kind of kicking the big aviation people a little bit and bugging them a little and getting underneath their skin? Well, I'll tell you another quick story. When I was back east, I was honored to be inducted into the Canadian Aviation Hall of Fame, and I gave a speech at a dinner there, and this was 2 years ago, and I sort of said I'm really honored to be given this this recognition, but my job is yet to be done here, and it's all about electrifying aviation. And I kind of heard this guffawing in the audience when you think about all the establishment. There was Pratt and Whitney and Bombardier and all these people in the audience, and it wasn't guffawing, but there was certainly not a lot of applause, let's put it that way. And the next day, Pratt and Whitney actually invited me and my team to come to the factory and have a tour in Montreal, Dorval, I guess it is. And so we toured around, and it was like stepping back into time. I mean, everything was just so old. And we went into the boardroom, and basically they started asking me all these questions about, why I was doing this and how I was doing it and all the rest of it. And you can see they were seriously concerned. I mean, like they were kind of going, well, wow, this is, this could put us out of business, kind of thing. And then I said to them, you've been asking me all these questions, like, so what have you guys got going in terms of a plan here to electrify, like what's your vision for this? And they kind of went, oh, it's really hard for us to react to these things. We've thought about it a lot, but we don't really know what to do.
And that was 2 years ago. Well, now they have a hybrid program on the boards there. So they have moved ahead with it. But, you know, it was pretty stunning. Here I am in this huge, you know, multinational company, and we're just little airline from Vancouver, and they're kind of like, you know, holy crap, what are you doing?
So much easier for you to innovate too, because you're smaller, you're, you know, much
totally.
Smaller.
Yeah. Well, they made that point.
The computer kind of glitched out a bit there. Have they looked into hybrid for regular airplanes where, you know, they use the fuel for takeoff and then maybe once they're in the air that they go electric?
Yeah. So hybrid is really the way you're going to get to the electrification of aviation in any practical way for heavier aircraft anytime soon. So unless hydrogen comes along and is proven to be viable, which they're working on a lot now. There are actually prototypes with hydrogen fuel cells flying, and really the hydrogen fuel cell is just a replacement for the battery, right? So it will still drive an electric motor the same way. But I think in heavier aircraft, you're going to see a lot of hybrid before you get to full electric, because things have to change pretty dramatically in the technology, lithium technology, and in the chemical technology to be able to go long distances with heavy aircraft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's the weight issue too. Is how big of a difference is it with you with the weight, with your plane, with the batteries versus a typical one? Well, it's electric Beaver versus the.
Yeah, just to give you, to give you an idea, when I took off on that day on December 10th, the plane was at gross weight with just me. Yeah. So me and the batteries, but the batteries were and still are, they're being converted shortly. Batteries that have a lot of safety built into them for thermal runaway, and that's very heavy. So, so we knew they were going to be heavy. But now we've got a battery company out of Switzerland that's actually providing us with a battery pack that's like 50% of the weight for the same energy density. And that combined with the new motor from Magniex will have a payload. Well, we don't have it all in the air yet, but in August we will. And it's looking on paper to be somewhere around 70% of the payload that we would have in a conventionally powered aircraft. So it's getting there. Yeah.
And then as a company, you think eventually you'll be saving a lot of money because you won't have to upkeep with the engines, right? I mean, I don't know what it is. Is it 20 components to 2,000, much like the e-car? I mean,
yeah. So most people have experience with electric motors in terms of, fan motors and different things that just keep spinning away. I mean, I've got a fan in my ceiling that, big ass fan it's called, but it's up there turning away. It's been turning for 4 years and it's never stopped, and it doesn't squeak. It doesn't do anything, and it just keeps going. I mean, it's a quality motor. In turbine engines that we currently run, we're running them at 800 degrees centigrade on startup, and that just wear and tear is huge. And in an electric motor, there's very little heat at all. It's just bearings and windings, and they're super simple. And there's no reason that they can't go for multiples of hours that we're currently limited to on the turbine aircraft and piston aircraft. So so that reduces cost dramatically. And of course, what we're hoping is at the end of the day, we can reduce cost overall in our operation and pass that on in terms of reduced fares, and then open our market up to more people, and that more people can commute by seaplane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, having driven my electric car well over 100,000 kilometers, all I've ever done is put windshield wiper fluid in.
Yeah, I've never had my Tesla in the shop. Like, I've had 2 Teslas now, and I'm 6 years into this, I guess, and I've never had it in the shop. And I keep, when I go there for some reason, like to get a badge or something replaced on the body or whatever, and I go, why don't you guys service my vehicle? And they go, well, here, look at the screen. There's nothing to do. Like, you still have 75% brakes and whatever. We'll call you when you need to come in. And they've never called me, and the thing just keeps going. So that's in an airplane, that's awesome.
It's exactly in your airplanes. You're gonna love that. What else did I want? Big big savings. And then, so I guess, yeah, I mean, you're doing all this stuff with your own business, with everybody with this POW challenge. We're all trying to do stuff in our own lives. So, you know, what, have you always been a sustainable person at home? You know, I see that you're running this farm now. Or has that also been part of the whole journey since 2007, since your employees started bugging you, or
Yeah.
has that always been part of it?
Yeah, I think so. And I also have I have a daughter who's in her mid 30s, and she's, a student of sustainability. And so, she's certainly got a chance to lobby me for things, and because she's smart and I listen to her. And so she really got interested in this whole sustainable farming and regenerative farming. And so we happen to live on a 33-acre farm in Squamish, and so we're creating a regenerative farm here, and we're hoping to we're going to run it as a business, but we're also hoping to have a really large educational component, because we're so accessible to the community here and to the Lower Mainland, and people can see how a regenerative farm works. And I don't know, how many people and what they know about regenerative farming, but it's hugely important to the planet, because it takes, we're going to take these chemicals out of the soil and remove, right now, basically what we're doing is we're doing hydroponics and because you and then putting chemicals into to make it work. Regenerative farming doesn't do that at all. It uses livestock and rotational grazing and all kinds of things to keep the soil naturally doing what it's supposed to do. But on top of all of that, it creates photosynthesis, which takes the carbon out of the atmosphere where it belongs, into the earth. And if we went back to regenerative farming for the entire planet, all of the carbon that's whirling around up there in the atmosphere would be basically sucked out and put back in the earth. So, it's super important that people get it, and some of the big companies now are getting it, and they're buying up. They're doing it for PR value to a certain extent, but they're starting regenerative farms. I know some of the larger industrialized farming companies are actually starting regenerative farming, which is really interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's inspiring. I think most of us have seen The Littlest Big Farm or Biggest Little Farm. What is it?
Biggest Little Farm. Yeah.
That one.
Also, Kiss the Ground is a super interesting one. It's on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's narrated by Woody Harrelson, but it gives you a really good perspective on the whole regenerative farming.
Yeah, we're all trying to garden and everything, and it just makes sense to push all these. We're basically going back in time to what it used to be, but bringing it back now. But I think farm sounds fantastic, and it really is quite often our kids that push us into this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, certainly true in my case.
Oh, yeah, mine too. You start looking at them, you're like, well, I've got to do something for you guys, because if I don't, then I'm being a hypocrite and not giving you the world you deserve. So
absolutely. Now I have a granddaughter to as well. So, there's another generation to look out for.
Oh yeah. Those are the best too. There's less responsibility for you there. You can have
you hand it back.
Couple questions here just from Paul Wright out of Whistler. He's curious about, do you actually swap? Are you planning to basically just recharge your batteries when you land, or battery swaps? I mean, battery swaps to me seems pretty complicated with the vehicle industry, but maybe it could work with yours. But
it might work on clean sheet aircraft that are yet to be designed and certified, but on the retrofits, it doesn't really work, because the batteries have to be built into the airframe to the point where swapping out doesn't really work. But it's really not necessary. The charging right now, we haven't been doing a lot of fast charging, because we've had the luxury of with a prototype of not having to. But on paper, we should be able to do 1 for 1. So a minute of flight for a minute of charging. So 30-minute flight, 30-minute charge, which is totally workable. And that's having the infrastructure on the docks. But in places where we're more remote, if it becomes somewhere we want to operate from, we can actually take battery packs and transfer the energy from the pack to the onboard battery, because lithium you know, thankfully takes amperage, like as much as you can turn on the tap, it'll take it as long as you control the heat.
Mhm. Yeah, I've always been blown away. My Chevrolet does not charge quickly, whereas the Teslas charge so quickly.
Yeah, super quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should have never driven a Tesla. I've always had a little envy.
Well, they're pretty fun, and they do charge quickly, but there's a lot of batteries there, and yeah.
With yours, how long a flight do you think maximum flight you will, like in your dream right now? You know, you say they're 30-minute flights, so are you hoping to be able to fly for 2 hours and then charge, or kind of what's your?
Well, you know, I mean, the goal is to electrify the whole fleet. So in order to do that, I mean, our longest flight, regular scheduled flight, right now is to Fino or down to Seattle once they get the borders open again, which is around, you know, sort of a little less than an hour. So in order to electrify the whole fleet, scheduled fleet, we would have to have that kind of range plus reserve of about a half an hour. Right now we're looking at sort of half an hour plus reserve of half an hour, so 1 hour. But you know, this is retrofitted aircraft, and this is a step, sort of an interim step, really, to use legacy aircraft, because there are aircraft being designed right now, you know, carbon fiber aircraft that is super light and more conducive to using this sort of technology, and that are not very far away. In fact, I'm on the design panel of one of them, and they're probably about 3 years away. So I would see us, you know, after 3-4 years starting to convert over to totally redesigned aircraft. So really, we're just trying to get a jump on things by doing the retrofit and get through the regulatory side and get the technology proven and all of that. So
The retrofit is really cool to think that plane, the skeleton of it, was built in the 60s, right? And now it's flying 50 years later.
Yeah, 60s and earlier. We actually have one in the fleet that was built in, I think, 1951. So pretty older than me.
Yeah, if only we could do that to some of our insides, do a quick swap out to some new technology. Let's thanks for everything you've told us. I'm just going to look into the questions here, see what Izzy's got to ask you a few questions from the gang, because yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I can't wait. My dad lives on Salt Spring, and I'll probably use this as an excuse to fly in your plane once it's happening, just because I think it's amazing and I love the technology.
Yeah, we're targeting, by the way, I've just been in meetings about this today. We're targeting the event that's happening a year from now in Vancouver. The Formula E race is coming to Vancouver in late June, or sorry, it's either early, mid-June. They haven't really nailed the dates down. And so that, you know, that's a big event. There's like 45,000 people will probably be in attendance. It's a 3-day deal. They're going to have big concerts and all kinds of stuff going on down in Falls Creek. So I sort of threw the gauntlet down today to my team and said, you know, we've got to carry our first passenger, paying passenger who's going to have to, you know, buy that ticket and donate the money to charity. Well, probably, you know, 3 or 4 passengers that want to be on that. Go down in history as the first passengers to be on a fully electric, you know, commercial flight. So we're shooting for it. It's a year away. It's going to be hard, but you know, that's the pole we want to plant on the mountain. So
yeah, that's a pretty good one. You could even maybe something to do with the winners. Maybe the winners get a free just for extra marketing. But yeah, I can't wait to see that flag on the mountain.
That'll be a proud moment if we can pull that off. We'll see, but
fingers crossed for you.
Yeah.
What do you think, Izzy? We got any questions here from anybody in the gang?
Yeah, there's a few. I think you touched on a few things here, but Paul Wright asked, are you still using NASA batteries? It must be challenging getting Canadian approval to take lithium or equivalent up on a flight.
So yeah, because everything is prototype and flying under a experimental permit. They're pretty liberal with what we're doing because I'm expendable apparently. But But I really don't have to worry about that because it is super safe. But the batteries, you're right. The batteries we were using were actually on the space station, or not the actual batteries, but similar ones. And that's why they're so heavy, because they were built, you know, with like each cell has like a ceramic casing around it. And so they're super heavy. And so we're ditching those batteries this summer and moving to the state-of-the-art stuff, which is now going to control the thermal runaway with a whole new chemical process, which is much lighter.
Cool.
Must be some great learnings that you've had along the way.
Oh yeah, I mean, every day I you know, I'm a bit of a geek for it, so I like it. But yeah, there's a tremendous amount to learn, and some of it's necessary and some of it's just interesting. But
yeah, talking about the weight, I guess, of the aircraft. Paul also asked, does it make a difference having an aircraft that weighs the same on takeoff as landing? With fuel, you obviously come in much lighter.
yeah, so that's interesting, because the takeoff weight's the same as the landing weight, and so that's one, you know, one of the few disadvantages of batteries is the fact that you're taking off, you know, they don't deplete as you go along. So that's why it's important that you get the batteries as light as possible, because you're stuck with it, and so that you're not burning any weight off there at all. And airplanes typically are designed, you know, in their current state, especially the retrofitted ones that we're using, to burn off fuel and then be lighter. So there is a bit of a compensation there that has to take place in terms of, you know, it's not getting lighter as you go along.
Right.
Well, great. Greg, thanks a ton. Honestly,
Oh, no problem.
for being a shit disturber when people say you're crazy, and just keeping going forward, because that's obviously what we need.
It makes it a lot more fun when people think you can't do it.
Oh yeah, when those doubters are actually having to believe, it's a big step. So I think you're definitely pushing it, and just hearing about the big airlines and those guys and how they, you know, started, you know, you shook their foundations and they're all worried. So that's great.
Yeah. No, it's good, and you know, I mean, somebody's got to pioneer, and you know, you do usually pay a price for pioneering, but ours has so far been really positive. So.
Oh yeah, no, and just imagine how excited everybody will be when they can, because I mean, eco anxiety is building in tons of people, and if they all of a sudden have a green option, they're going to take it. You know.
Yeah,
so,
that's what we're hoping.
Greg, see my backdrop?
Yeah, can you guys see Paul's?
Greg, that's the Neowise comet going over your Salt Spring Beaver up at Whistler. And
I can't see it.
Someday that's going to be electric.
He's just in the top of your screen, and the little.
There it is.
Yeah. So there at the bottom is your Salt Spring Beaver, and over top of it is last summer's Neowise going over top. So someday that'll be an electrified beaver doing that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I thought that was maybe Elon's satellite train up there, but no, it's much nicer looking than that.
We saw that while camping a couple of weeks ago, and it was pretty wild.
Pretty wild, isn't it?
Yeah. Pretty crazy.
Apparently they're painting them all black now, so it won't do that or something.
Oh, darn.
That's a beautiful shot.
Great shot, Paul.
Awesome.
Greg, I love the sound. We live just down from you on Nick North, close to your takeoff at Whistler, and it's like a nursery rhyme melody, hearing the beavers come and go. I love the sound of them.
Great. Well, that's interesting, because, you know, they're it's always interesting to me that, you know, you say that and that's music to my ears, and then we get the ones that just you're ruining my life, you know, like with the sound of those aircraft. It's driving me to, you know, complete madness. So, you know, but there's always the other side of the coin too, the people that like it, right? And they like the activity and the sound.
They've never been picked up on skis by a beaver in the middle of nowhere in the Arctic. It's just a lovely sound hearing that little machine coming along and taking off in it. So it's a nursery rhyme to the ears.
Yeah, they're quite unique sounding, but the sound of silence from the electric motor is kind of cool too.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I guess we'll end it on that note. The sound of silence that we're all looking forward to. Thanks, Greg. Thanks,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
Pleasure.
so much.
Thanks, Paul, for the photo.
And thanks everyone for joining. We will don't forget to do your reflections this month, and we will be sending out emails at the end of the month to remind you of that and lining up another exciting speaker for next month. So thank you, and everyone have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.